Hello everybody, Rich from Mountain Slider Garage. Welcome to a new season. This is the 2021-22 season of snowmobiling and the second season of Mountain Slider Garage. We had a pretty good season last year. Unfortunately, we didn't have great snow conditions to get out and test a lot of the stuff that I wanted to do. Hopefully this season's better. Today we're going to be talking about the Polaris drive systems. Whether you got a belt drive system or a chain drive system, we're going to talk about what options are out there, what choices you have. I see a lot of people asking on social media and the forums about different belts, what gear ratio should I use, what system should I use. We're going to go over options that are out there. Pretty exciting season for Polaris fans. They came out with a new sled, the Matrix. Pretty cool sled. I can hardly wait to get one and ride it this season. Whether you got a normally aspirated one or one with boost, it's going to be a phenomenal new sled. A lot of different options. When you order it, you could have gone with a couple of different options, a chain drive system, a belt drive system, the QD1, the QD2. There was a lot of options there. So we're going to talk about all that stuff today. So first we're going to talk about if you have a sled, an axis. This is axis. We're talking about axis 2016 to anything current. A lot of them came with the chain drive. A lot of those were the 3-inch lug tracks came with the chain. Some of the Assaults came with the chain. Some of the SKSs came with the chain. Most of the other ones, RMKs, came with the quick drive belt drive system. The chain is probably the most versatile as far as for how many options there are in different gear ratios. You can change the bottom gear. You can change the top gear. This came off an RMK. It's got a 44-tooth bottom gear, 19-tooth top gear, which I think is about 2.1 gear ratio. The chain really gives you so many different options because you can change the chain length, change the top gear, bottom gear, and so many different variables as far as what you want. You can go super low, you can go super high on your gearing. The chain's been around for a long time. It's pretty durable as long as you take care of your chain, make sure the tension is right, change the oil, and make sure nothing's worn in there. Probably it's worth inspecting probably once a year to see what's going on in your chain case. The other option, if you have a chain case model and you want a belt drive system, really the only option is an aftermarket belt drive system. You can't really put a QD2 on it or QD1. You could, but the time and the money it would cost you to do that, you're just better off buying an aftermarket belt drive system. There's 3 aftermarket belt drive systems out there. There's one in Canada, C3. There's one in northern Utah, Mountain Valley Machine or MVM. And the one I probably use the most is TKI out of Montana. I've used all 3 belt drive companies. They all make really good products. I tend to gravitate to TKI just because Tom is the most amazing guy, the guy that owns it. He is on the forums all the time, on social media all the time, answering questions. I hardly see any other business owners on social media asking questions of customers. So phenomenal product. I've seen him help customers out in off hours, send them a belt or a gear or something that they need when he's not open. He's just a phenomenal guy, has phenomenal customer service. So we're going to talk mostly about the TKI one. This is actually a belt drive off an Arctic, but it's the same principle. If you get a belt drive system for your chain drive Polaris, you're going to get a bottom gear, a top gear, and some kind of belt tensioner to tension the belt. All right, so we're talking about the TKI belt drive for the chain case model axis. It actually comes with a 58-tooth bottom gear. That's a little bit smaller than the one comes on the belt drive sled. I'll show you over here on the screen. This is the belt drive system that comes from TKI for the chain case model axis. And see how the chain case has this molded edge right here of aluminum, or I think it's actually magnesium. But it's got that molded edge, so they can't put the 63-tooth gear in here because it's too big. A smaller 58-tooth for the chain case model sleds. Okay, let's go back over here. So if you use that 58-tooth, you can have the same number top gear, 25 to 30, but your gear ratios are going to be a little different with the 58-tooth bottom gear that you get with the chain case model TKI kit. You have some different gear ratios depending on what that is. You can't get quite as low gear with the chain case model as you can with the belt drive model. And so you have a lot of combinations with that. The nice thing about this, if you live in the Midwest, you want to ride your sled out west in the mountains, you want to go from low elevation kind of trail riding to high elevation mountain riding, you want an easy way to quickly change your gear ratio without having to get in your chain case. This is a really nice way to do it. You just change this top gear. All right, now that we've talked about the options for your chain drive sled, let's talk about the options if you have a Polaris Axis 2016 to the current one with a Polaris quick drive belt drive system. Now the belt drive that came on the Axis from day one is this one right here. It's a 22 upper tooth and a 43 lower tooth. It's a 1.95 ratio. It's a pretty high ratio. A lot of guys in the early years, when a lot of the belt drive stuff wasn't available, they were taking, this is the gears off the Pro, the 13 to 15 Pro. It's a 21 top gear, a 44 bottom gear, and then you use the stock axis belt on it, and it gives you a 2.09 ratio, a little bit lower than the stock axis ratio. I've used a lot of these. It's a nice, give your sled a little bit more pop. I feel like you can get a little bit more track speed out of it. It's just a really nice little add to clean up your bottom end a little bit and give you a little bit more throttle response, that little bit lower gear ratio. So those are the two options until last year when Polaris came out with the QD2. Now why they call this the QD2, I'm not sure, because really the QD1 should be the Pro gears, QD2 should have been the stock axis gear, and then this actually should be QD3, but I guess it's the second gear drive system you can get on the axis, so they call it QD2. But anyway, this uses the same top gear that comes on your stock axis belt drive system, but they have a much bigger bottom gear. This bottom gear is 50 tooth compared to 43 tooth on your regular one. And this gives you a 2.27 gear ratio. It uses a longer belt. And if I have an install video, if you want to go back through the Polaris Axis videos, there's a video where we took this last year, installed it on my 2020 Chaos. There's a little trick you got to do to install it because the bottom gear is so big. And then we went out and tested it, and there's a whole video on that if you want to look that up on my YouTube channel of installing the QD2 on your other axis sled, either from 16 to 20. But anyway, those are the three Polaris gear ratios for the belt drive you can put on your Polaris axis. Now, if you go to Aftermarket, another popular one for years have been the Kurtz Polaris belt drive system, and that's just a lower gear and a bottom gear that replace your stock Polaris stuff. It also comes with a different belt. This is a 2.10 to 1 gear ratio system. It's the same gear ratio as the Pro gears that came on the Polaris Pro from 13 to 15. It's the same ratio, just a different setup, and it's made by Kurtz Polaris. I actually got this from a company called Blown Motor. They're a website that sells snowmobile online parts. If you're someone that's overseas, Europe, Canada, Japan, somewhere, and you want one of these Kurtz Polaris gear drive sets, they have these in stock. You can have them. They'll order them to you. They'll ship it to you overseas or anywhere in the United States. This is a really nice setup. These have been used for years from all the top riders. It's durable. If you get it, you want to make sure you get an extra belt with it. But the thing is, it only comes in one gear ratio. And the nice thing they've done this year, Kurtz has, is they've made this where you can buy just the gears, but it uses the stock Polaris belt instead of an aftermarket belt. And typically this kit's around, depending on what you get in it, is about $600. For the old kit that comes with an aftermarket belt, but the new kit that's just a set of Kurtz gears that uses the stock Polaris belt is under $400. So it's actually a pretty nice value if you want a little bit lower gear ratio for your axis. So the next option is, and it's got the most gear ratio options, we go back to the TKI belt drive system. The TKI belt drive for the stock axis that comes with a quick drive system has a 63 tooth bottom gear. If you want to use the 58 tooth bottom gear with the quick drive system, you can. You just can't use the 63 tooth with the one that goes with the chain case. As you can see on this one, you can get a lot lower gear ratio with the 25 tooth and the 63 tooth, the 2.5. The lowest gear ratio you can get with the chain case model is a 2.3 ratio. All right, the other thing I'm going to mention real quick, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on, is when we're talking about belt drives and your chain in your chain case, we're talking about just the ratio, like these ratios here are just the ratio of that from going from a small gear here to a lower gear to a bigger gear here. If we take into account how big the diameter of our drivers are in a drive shaft, that's your final drive ratio. Once it goes through the belt drive system, then into your driver, then to your track, that's final drive ratio. And you can change your final drive ratio by changing the diameter of your driver. So this is an 8-tooth driver. It's a little bit bigger diameter than this 6-tooth driver. This is a 3.5-inch pitch 6-tooth driver. This is a 3-inch pitch 8-tooth driver. This is a little bit bigger diameter than this. So that's going to change your final drive ratio. But I think we'll talk about final drive ratios in a different video because it could take a long time. Those are your options if you have a Polaris Axis snowmobile. You have the stock Axis gears, 1.95 ratio. You can use the Pro Polaris gears, which are 2.09 ratio. You can use the QD2, which is a 2.27 ratio. the Kurt's Polaris gear, which is a 2.1 ratio, or you can use the TKI belt drive, which is any of these ratios, to where if you're someone that you think you're going to be wanting to change your gear ratio throughout the season, this is probably your best option. Like if you're riding from low altitude to high altitude, from trail conditions to mountain conditions, the TKI is about the best one because it's so easy to change gear ratios on that. You really can't change gear ratios with any of these other ones unless you like go from the standard axis gears to like the QD2, then you can, but you don't have a lot of options there like you do if you buy an aftermarket kit. Okay, now that we've talked about the different options for your axis as far as your gearing goes, we're going to talk a little about what gear ratio. There's so many different variables on what gear ratio you use, whether you want a 2.1 ratio, 2.5 ratio. It's going to depend on a number of different things, and I listed a few of them. The snow conditions you ride in are going to be pretty important, whether you're on the severe West Coast where you get a lot of real heavy wet snow versus if you're in Utah and Colorado and you get the super light fluffy powder. That can affect what gear ratio you might want. Whether you're just trail riding and just cruising versus if you're full-on mountain riding, boondocking, that can affect what gear ratio you want. What altitude you ride at. If you're riding in Minnesota where you're almost at sea level versus Colorado where you're always right at 10,000 feet, big difference in what you might want in gear ratio. You might want a pretty high gear ratio for riding down the flatlands of the Midwest versus a lower gear ratio for mountain riding at high altitude. Other thing that can affect it, what kind of power your engine puts out and what kind of modifications you have, whether it's completely stock, if you do a big bore or a pipe or even a turbo. Some people like a little bit higher gear ratio for a turbo because they've got the power to spin the track and get higher track speed. There's a lot of different opinions on what kind of gear ratio you want. Rider weight, if you're 140 pounds soaking wet versus a guy that's 300 pounds, you might want a lower gear if you're that heavier guy to start moving that sled with more weight on it. What track length you have and the lug height. If you have a 3-inch lug track and it's a 174, you might need a lower gear than if you're someone that's got a 146, 2.5-inch track and you just kind of have a fun little boondocking play sled. That can affect your gear ratio, what you want, whether it's lower or higher. The type of rider you are really depends. If you're a full-on mountain rider and all you do is technical tree riding, that's kind of the riding I do. We're always in the trees and the little valleys all day. We're on and off the throttle a ton. I like a lower gear. I really like the QD2 for that. That QD2 gear ratio just gives me that lower end snap and throttle and response so I can get the track moving, the sled moving around trees and through gullies and stuff. And so I really like the QD2 for that kind of riding. So there's a lot of variables when picking. If you want to, if you're going to go with like a TKI belt drive and you're unsure about what ratio you want, call Tom. He knows a lot about gear ratios, what would be good for you, where you ride, what kind of snow, what kind of rider you are. Personally, if you're full-on mountain rider, I think the Kurt's 2.1 ratio, the Pro Ride gears, or for me, I really liked the QD2 this year. Those are kind of my two go-to factory Polaris gears. Is really the QD2 is the one I like the most, and the one I ordered on my new sled this year, my Matrix. If you have any questions about this, like I said, I have another video where we installed the QD2 last year and tested it on a Polaris, a turbo Polaris Chaos. If you're new to Polaris and the belt is a little bit of a mystery to you, I have another video just on how to change the belt. I'll give you a couple different ways. So there's a video on YouTube of how to change your drive belt on your Polaris axis for the quick drive. And that can be a little bit of a mystery. If you're out in the middle of nowhere and you break your belt, you need to get a new one. One, it's good to carry a new quick drive belt with you if you have a quick drive system or any belt drive system. And two, it's pretty easy to change if you kind of know the little tricks of doing it. So I have a video on that if you want to go look at that. So, okay, a couple of last thoughts on gear ratios for the axis. Now we have quite a large continuum. If we go on the highest gear, which is the 1.95 stock axis ratio, out here to TKI or any aftermarket where you can get 2.5. We have a continuum from the highest gear ratio to the lowest. Highest gear ratio will give you the highest speeds on the trail. Your top speed will be the highest, but you're going to lose a little bit of low-end pop with a high gear ratio. That low-end acceleration, kind of like if you have a Moab rock crawler, you're going to want a real low gear ratio. You're going to accelerate and climb really fast, but you're going to sacrifice top end. So there's a continuum whether you want to go fast on the top end or accelerate fast on the bottom end with the lowest gears. So where are you supposed to be? Where do you want to be? There's no perfect answer. There's all those variables that we talked about, and there's even more than I listed. But I'm going to kind of give a blanket statement since I've tested it pretty extensively. The Pro Ride, the Kurtz gear ratio, the 2.1 gear ratio is a pretty big benefit for probably anyone that has a stock axis with this 1.95 ratio if you're a mountain rider. I've tested this on the hill. We were at a hill once when I first got my 2020 Chaos, probably about a 35-degree slope. There was probably, I think there was about 800 feet of vertical climb, and then we had like about a 20-yard ride or straight up into the hill. Ran this multiple times with the stock 2.95, and then again with like the Kurtz ratio, the 2.1 ratio. Watched RPMs, watched track speed. We even did belt temps from the bottom to the top. The things we did notice consistently, we gained about 100, 150 RPM pretty consistently with going to the lower gears. We gained a couple miles an hour track speed going to the lower gears, and we ran a little bit cooler belt temps when we did all this testing. I haven't done this testing with the QD2 yet. Like I said, snow conditions last year were so bad. This same hill had rocks on it all year long poking out, so I just didn't feel comfortable doing it last year. So QD1, which is this one, the 1.95, safe to say that if you go to the Kurtz gear ratio, the Pro gears, you're going to have a pretty good benefit. My go-to gears from last year was a QD2. I really liked it. The low-end pop you get if you're trying to pop up out of a ravine, if you're trying to pop the front end up over a log or something, this gives you so much better low-end response, the QD2. I haven't really tested it on top end yet, see what it does on a hill like this, but I will this year. But that, for my kind of riding, the QD2 was the cat's meow for me. And then if you even want a lower gear ratio that you could get from the TKI belt drive, I know guys that are running in the 2.5 range, 2.4 range, their personal preference. Gear ratios is really personal preference, a lot like clutching. If you talk to TKI, you talk to Kurtz, you talk to Carl Cycle, they probably all give you 3 different answers on what's the best gear ratio for you. You just got to test it, find out what's good for you. But I will say a little bit lower gears on the axis if you're a purely mountain rider will give you a little bit of benefit. So I hope this episode was helpful and give you a little bit better understanding on the gearing ratios that are available for your Polaris axis snowmobile, what you might look for in something, what products are out there. I have tested all of these, and I know the products that I've used here, the Kurtz, the TKI, even the C3 belt drives and the Mountain Valley machine belt drives, they're all really good products. Used the QD2 a lot last year. I bought from Polaris, really good product. Didn't have a single problem with it all year. So if you like these videos, we're going to be doing more all season. Like them, share them with your friends, share them on some of the social media posts. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. There's a little red and I think a red button down here that says subscribe on YouTube. We'll be back with more videos this year. This is Rich signing off from Mountain Slaughter Garage. We'll see you next time.